Welcome to Between the Rows, where you get to hear the stories behind the stories in Canada's leading farm publications.
Hi, and welcome to Between the Rows. This is the second part of a 4-part series on farming and COVID-19 put together by the Glacier FarmMedia news team. I'm Laura Rance. In this segment, we look at how the farm community and the agricultural sector is dealing with the unusual challenges presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. Daily News editor Dave Bedard talks to farm family coach Elaine Fraze. The Western Producers' Robert Arnason interviews the president of Keystone Agricultural Producers, Bill Campbell, and we ask 3 of our publication editors for their insights on the situation facing farmers this spring. First up, let's hear from Elaine Fraze, a Boissevain, Manitoba farmer who has been working and writing for farm families for the past 25 years. She spoke with Daily News editor Dave Bedard.
Elaine, welcome back to Between the Rows.
Thanks, Dave.
So we have a situation right now where the self-isolation that's often part of farming anyway is now just short of mandatory. To a distant observer, it might seem like this doesn't change much in terms of how a family farm or even a farm with paid employees might operate. But with spring coming up fast, I somehow doubt it's that simple.
Well, and what we're seeing is customers have been on the farm today picking up their canola seed, and it's like everyone is getting ready, maybe a little more in advance or a little more focused, because they're not sure what every week is going to look like as the announcements keep changing week by week. And tomorrow is April 1st, and we're going to no longer have access to non-essential services. So one thing that I have seen changing is that people are preparing to hunker down, I think, in a way, and be as prepared as they can. On our farm, Dave, we've also put up a COVID-19 sign that says, please stay in your truck for the safety of our employees and our family. We'll be happy to serve you and deliver your papers to your window. So we're changing the way we interact with the customers and the people coming onto our farm.
Mm-hmm. How do you suppose this would change the management strategy on farms generally?
Well, I've been listening to lots of webinars and working with my team at BDO. I'm now doing consultant work with BDO, and there's a very good webinar by the Covenant Group talking about how to take advantage of the crisis. And people are in a place of high stress and high anxiety from a coaching perspective, Dave, because they're in the neutral zone, which I call the pain of not knowing. And the neutral zone is like having your truck gear in neutral, because if you're not in gear, you're not going anywhere. So as coaches, we would like to encourage farm families to really be intentional about how they choose to be and how they choose to see what's happening around them. So this is a good opportunity on your farm, not only to be getting ready to plant and taking care of your livestock, but it's also a good opportunity to use the downtime from not being able to watch sports to having more family conversations, more connections with your friends, and maybe also working on your business rather than just working in your business, because there seems to be some blocks of time now made available that weren't formerly available.
Mm-hmm. Now it's sort of a way of of people sort of preserving a sense of control in their life. It often seems like there's a lot in primary crop and livestock production that isn't, like the weather or prices, commodity prices, input prices.
Farmers have contingency plans for that. They have crop insurance for weather risk and different global agro-risk solutions and other new tools that have presented themselves. I think the biggest tension for feeling out of control is the revenue stream question and the finances. And so there's tension around existing relationships possibly with creditors and how they're going to make payments. But at this time of year, Dave, we're looking at a brand new year again of a crop, and some people are still very concerned how they're getting their canola off that was planted last year. So there's a lot of your listeners will still be using creative opportunities to finish the harvest of 2019, let alone think about planting the crop of 2020. So I think the farmers who do well in these situations are the ones that have a positive mindset, take really good control of their thoughts, keep their thoughts captive, and look at different ways that they can create solutions and how they can create solutions within their farm team, and possibly how they can also create solutions with their neighbors. So it's definitely a time to stay sharp and to stay mentally well. And then the tension is also around managing your stress, right? Because besides putting a crop in and managing finances, we had no idea what the impact of this was going to look like. We have no idea how long it's going to last. And there again is that high place of anxiety and stress because it's the pain of not knowing. But what we do know, based on research according to Dr. Nikki Gerard, who I've been quoting many times in the last 2 weeks, she had a farm stress study many years ago where she studied farm families in Saskatchewan for 12 years. And what she found, her title was called "What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger," which is an interesting title. And the first one is communication. So communication with yourself in terms of how you manage your thought processes, how you see your world, how you take care of yourself, and then communication obviously with your spouse and taking care of your marriage and your partnership, and then taking care of your family. So that's the family circle. And then the farm business circle is how are you going to take care of business, and how are you going to be prepared and manage your employees. So our employees are still coming to work. We're an essential service, but they keep their distance, and one of them has befriended a neighbor who was in self-isolation, and he delivered groceries to their front door for them.
That's so
Our
nice.
local co-op here, you can click and save, do shopping by online if you want to, so that you don't have to go into the store. So businesses are adapting. And so the first one is communicating with people of what your expectations are. The second one would be how you want to be connected with community. And that's what I think is quite fascinating, is that I've had so many awesome conversations with my emotional support group, my family, and a lot of my girlfriends who live all across Canada. And I had a Zoom call with them. I do FaceTime. I sit down with a cup of tea. And so for farmers who are under a lot of mental stress, they need to really think about what does their mental support or the emotional support system look like at this time. And I know some farmers are bored because they're used to just coming and vegging in front of a television, and they don't really want to watch any more COVID news anymore. And so, right?
Exactly.
They're really sad that the Jets aren't in the playoffs, and the Raptors are shut down. Like, all of the things that used to give them an ability to pass the time have been taken away. So I want to go back to that thought of don't waste a good crisis. And that sounds quite harsh and brutal and blunt. But what can this teach you? What do you want to hold on to? So in coaching, we have this thing called what do you want to let go of? And there's a lot of grieving right now, Dave, when you look at the young, like my father had Alzheimer's, and I saw this clip on TV the other night of a woman who was no longer allowed to comfort her agitated husband with dementia because he's in a care home, she's not. And it's very upsetting to her that she can't be with him to lessen his agitation. And so they're getting creative with Zoom and FaceTime and ways of still communicating. And we have to kind of have these workarounds, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's really hard. But we need to understand that we've lost a lot of freedom right now, and that makes us sad, and that we cry or have these outbursts thinking of loved ones who are in hard situations. And I would just like to give a shout-out to all of the essential care workers, the health workers, the people at my local grocery store, our first responders, everybody who's our neighbor, who's also, first on the scene to help. And everybody does not want to put their family at risk. So things are always going to be changing. That's life, and it's about managing your expectations and being intentional about how you choose your response to what's going on around you. I was looking through some of my writings and did an article a long time ago about managing family tension. So when I talk about letting go of things that are out of your control, but holding on to what's truly important to you. And your mental health during a season like this is really important. So it's important to share what's going on for you and the story that you're telling yourself, which is what Brené Brown would say. And then what do you want to take on? Like I'm planting a more robust garden. I haven't quite ordered my seeds yet, but I've planted my gladiola bulbs this week. My little granddaughters that are under the age of 2 helped me clean off my gladiola bulbs, and I've got them planted in peat and all. I'm pruning my shrubs and just getting ready, which is, getting ready for the next season. And I think you might want to dust off your craft table or your hobbies or things that help you create things and have a sense of play and creativity. Playing with my grandchildren right now who live right next door is the best stress reducer I have. Staying in contact with my daughter who's isolated and not used to not having supports close by are really, really important for keeping our minds and emotions healthy during this really uncertain time.
Mm-hmm. And I'll be interested to see too whether this reordered sense of priorities that's been taking place during this crisis, whether that will in fact survive the crisis.
Well, an interesting thing, Dave, like farm families have a very unique culture in that we work within our family residence, and our work is just literally out our back door. And I read a comment yesterday from a business person who says his children just love having him home. And so he's getting lots of great family time and nurturing and bonding time with his children. And I think it's maybe starting to cause him to question whether he's made his priorities correct in the amount of time that he spends away from family. So there are lessons to be learned in what feels connected. We had coffee last week at 2 o'clock in the afternoon with our pastor on Zoom. Our church family is meeting digitally on Zoom or through YouTube videos or MP4 downloads from the church website. There's all kinds of creative community things like people turning on Christmas lights and putting I heard in Manitou they're putting teddy bears in the windows. In Manitou and Winnipeg you have the Winnipeg Art Gallery, window gallery, where people are putting things in their windows. But farm families, if you think about it, we work pretty much in isolation a lot of the time. And yes, we connect community, but when we've got our heads down and we've got a crop to put in and calves to pull and livestock to feed, we're pretty determined that whatever's going around us, there's a job to get done. But that culture of being stoic about that is not helpful if you think you're just going to power through this and not pay attention to how you're feeling. So it's really important to take stock of your own mental and social and emotional well-being, I think.
Mm-hmm. Elaine Fraze, thank you very much for your time, and thanks for coming back onto Between the Rows.
Right, and I'm happy to encourage families on my website at farmfamilycoach.com. So just reach out and maybe I can talk to them on Zoom someday too. Thanks, Dave. All the best.
That was Glacier FarmMedia's daily news editor, Dave Bedard, speaking with Elaine Fraze. As the weather warms up, farmers, of course, are gearing for spring seeding. But for many of you, it means completing last year's harvest first. Keystone Agricultural Producers President Bill Campbell talked to the Western Producers Robert Arnason about the special uncertainties surrounding farmers this spring, even before COVID-19 hit. Here's their conversation.
Hey, Bill, thanks for coming on Between the Rows. I appreciate it. Well, thank you very much for asking me. It's indeed an honor. So, obviously, COVID-19 has been a massive story for the last few months. A lot of talk now of how this is going to impact farmers going forward. Are you worried about what this virus is going to mean for spring seeding? What are some of your concerns? Well, I guess like everybody in this country, the conversation and the nature of the conversation changes daily and week by week. Initially I thought that it would be, a concern, but as we move forward and as we see more cases and more of community transmission, it becomes more apparent the magnitude of this. And so, yes, I am concerned about this because you have to realize that agriculture and especially the grain sector is going to be spending a tremendous amount of money in the next, starting maybe the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, say 1st of May. And how that will impact us, I'm not sure that anybody has any certainty. And so we're at risk. And so, yeah, it's a concern.
So I know that Cap, you're the president of the Keystone Agriculture Producers, and you guys have put out sort of like a fact sheet or information sheet to tell producers about, what they should be doing to kind of minimize the risk. Can you share some of the highlights from that information?
Well, and I guess as a provincial organization, we felt that it was best to be proactive. We've had some conversations, with our management team and with our board of directors and with our members about concerns that they have had. So, we have increased our social media presence. We've developed a checklist with regards to some of the COVID protocols that should be utilized on your farm, the washing your hands, hand sanitizer, the distance, social distancing, some of those things that, actually can be a common sense approach. But as we deal with this, you have to think twice almost about some of these actions, because we have been very comfortable in our way of doing business on the farm. And sometimes there is a comfort level where you will not adhere to all of the things that may be required in a pandemic situation.
So obviously, farmers don't do this alone. They depend on suppliers of fertilizer, seed, other inputs to make this all happen. Do you have any concerns about supply chain disruptions that may affect farmers? Like, how could this play out? Or maybe that's not a big risk. What's your sense of that?
Well, and I guess it, like I mentioned earlier, but we have become accustomed to doing things the way we have done them, and for some part, may have taken certain things for granted. But looking forward, we've had quite a bit of conversation with regards to input suppliers and the industry, and I would suggest that a lot of people have taken the opportunity to put a lot of inputs in place because of, just logistics. Then we have come across this COVID-19 situation and further impacts. And as producers have conversations and start to think of down the road of all of the implications with regards to, input suppliers and how they will deal with this particular situation, it becomes a greater conversation and a greater concern about how all of that will play out. I think for the most part, producers have what I would suggest is a plan A, and they're comfortable with that, and we'll see how that evolves. My bigger concern is that Mother Nature ultimately has the determining factors, whether plan A plays out, or plan B, or plan C, or plan D. And if we get thrown a wild card from Mother Nature, how do we adapt and how do we change to plan B and plan C? Because we only have to realize that the two main crops in the States are corn and soybeans, and their input demands are significantly different. And if we have a corn crop in the States of greater than normal, where does that leave our fertilizer suppliers? And will they be able to access that? We've seen conversations in the last week with regards to the American border, and they say that it will not close for economic reasons. But if this escalates, will that still be on the table? And we realize a lot of our inputs and exports go to the States. So, it's something to be aware of, and it changes daily and weekly.
I guess another big concern or issue would be farm labor. I mean, if you are a farmer with, say, perhaps 10,000 acres of crop to put in, you're definitely going to have some employees or at least part-time employees or seasonal employees. So you have to deal with them and the potential of them getting this illness, and that complicates things a great deal, I imagine.
Well, and as we move forward, and with regards to the increased numbers of COVID positives in Manitoba, we start to see a greater community transmission, and that is a concern because I think they have signaled a couple of them in the Prairie Mountain Health District. So this is spreading, and if it was to get to your employees, then if they go into self-isolation for 14 days, how do you cope and how do you react? And so that relays into your labor pool. This could play out rather negatively with regards to some of those things. I've had conversations over the weekend with, different industries and the labor force, and people don't want to be around people that are COVID positive, and so whether they decide to show up and that part, I think we really need to acknowledge what some of our essential services and our healthcare workers are doing with regards to going to work every day, even though they are in the face of this particular thing. Their job does not give them the option, and and I would say, in Westman, we all think that it's a long ways away from us, but we still have the potential to have great jeopardy to our labor force, and it's the business the people we do business with as well that is a concern. So,
just one more question for you. As you well know, that there are other issues going on this year in terms of, getting crop on the ground. There's a lot of excess moisture around and millions of acres of leftover crop from 2019. Are those bigger concerns for you and other producers to deal with compared to COVID-19?
Well, I guess it's one of those things where today's challenge is the biggest challenge, and tomorrow is another day, and we start to see, as the spring runoff has happened here, we start to see the consequences of the harvest from 2019 and how we prepare a seed bed, and it gets to be one of those tasks where is there a light at the end of the tunnel, or is that the train coming at me? Is the deal, and the COVID-19 on top of that has just raised this level of uncertainty to a whole new level, and so I think all of those factors play a key part because if I don't get the crop off, I can't get the seed bed made. If I can't get the seed bed made, I can't sow the crop. So then if I finally do get the crop seeded, who's going to be my customer? How am I going to cope going ahead with COVID-19? And, what will the world look like in September, October? I guess the positive thing in agriculture that we really need to see is that people still need to eat, and we will grow the crops that people will need. And so, that determining factor has some stability to it. It's just how will this country look after we come out the other side of this pandemic is a question that a lot of agriculture would like to know, and I'm not sure anybody has the answers on that particular part because the economic fallout of this particular situation is going to be significant.
All right, thanks, Bill. I've been speaking with Bill Campbell, President of the Keystone Agricultural Producers. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And to you and your listeners, have a good day. And I guess the new sign-off is stay healthy and wash your hands. So.
That was the Western Producers' Robert Arnason talking with Keystone Agricultural Producers President Bill Campbell. Between the Rows also reached out to some of the editors in our network for their insights into the challenges this year presents and, of course, how the sector is coping. Mike Rain, managing editor of the Western Producer, said the COVID-19 crisis adds an extra layer of complexity to daily activities on the farm.
Well, while there is a lot of isolation available on a farm, especially during the growing season, you're out there. If you think about it, you're out there generally by yourself a lot. There's also times when many hands are needed, and so you have to be careful how you manage. And with such a shortage of skilled labor, losing one or two people from a team of 5 to 8 or less, losing one or two from a team of 2, really can hamper things. So we don't really know how this is going to play out. It comes down to taking a lot of safe steps around the farm to try and keep your team isolated and out of harm's way. And I think that's just critical.
So really, it sounds like it's the usual adage that an ounce of prevention is the key here.
An ounce of prevention is going to be the key. And I think if we're following all the guidelines that the government's placed out. I know FCC's been putting up a lot of posts through social media and direct mail and to producers with some guidelines and some help from Health Canada on how to manage your teams. I know we've been writing about it in our publications, Glacier FarmMedia. But producers, this adds an extra level of complexity. But in many cases, a lot of the suppliers, a lot of the fertilizer suppliers, seed providers, and those folks, they're also taking precautions. So you don't actually have to come into contact with you don't have to go into the scales. You don't have to actually physically meet with anybody at the elevator or at your farm inputs provider's office. They'll scale you and weigh you, load you without ever seeing them. So in some ways, it's sort of an ideal job. If you're gonna have a role in society where you can still work and be isolated, being a prairie farmer is not too bad.
Glenn Cheater, editor of Alberta Farmer Express, pointed out those complications extend all the way through the food chain.
If I can, let me start with a little story. I was in a grocery store last week, and there was this fellow in the produce aisle kind of leaning over, going back and forth, looking for something. And he spotted a produce clerk and asked him if he had this particular product. And the clerk said, "No, we're out of that." The fellow said, "But would you have anything in the back?" And the clerk paused and looked at him and said, "There is nothing in the back. Everything we have is on the shelves." It's a kind of a lesson in how our very efficient, just-in-time modern supply chains work. There really are no big storerooms in the back of grocery stores. But it's also a story that brings into focus that the grocery store is the end point of a very long and complicated chain that, for the most part, doesn't have a lot of redundancy either in supplies or in people. And that's really been at the heart of the stories that my reporters have been doing and our Glacier FarmMedia colleagues have been doing. Take seeding. The farmers are getting ready to seed and in many cases finishing last year's harvest. What happens if they need a part? Does their dealership have it? Can they get it installed if the farmer can't do it? Has the dealership done what it needs to do in order to stay open? These sorts of issues are across the board. So how do you have milk picked up on the farm? How do you get foreign workers? How do you run a cattle auction? How do you get treatment when you have sick animals? What do you do about potato contracts when the French fry business has collapsed because restaurants are closed? How do you handle crop insurance inspections? What do you do if a slaughter plant has sick workers and needs to shut down for a couple of weeks? All these things, all these complicated issues that can come up are being dealt with. And that's really what's impressed me the most, is that these are not simple things. And when you're trying to think about every potential eventuality, anything that could go wrong, there's just been this massive effort. And that is what is keeping these supply chains functioning at really a very high level.
However, Glenn said the extra rigor going into keeping supply chains functioning through the crisis could help position the Canadian agricultural sector for the future.
Any time that you have to go back to the very basics and think about everything you do, it forces you to put out that off, or forces you to focus on that job that we always want to put off, which is dealing with these what ifs, I got to make decisions on replacing equipment? Am I going to expand? Do I have enough storage? Do I have the kind of capabilities where I can weather some kind of hit? And often these hits are shorter term things. There'll be a resolution for them in a couple of weeks, but what do you do in the meantime?
Carrie Belanger, editor of Grey News, cautions against thinking things will go back to normal even after the current crisis has passed.
This pandemic we're experiencing right now, I don't think it's just going to stop and business will resume as normal. I believe that we are heading toward a new normal, and all of the protocols that are being placed at the farm level, more sanitary, phytosanitary, all of these practices that are being put in place by farmers themselves are absolutely going to strengthen their operations. Farmers already have this resilience within them. They deal with unknowns, uncertainties all the time. So that agriculture is strong because of that resilience, which starts at the foundation level, which is the farmer. I absolutely believe that they are going to come out of this stronger than ever with stronger value chains as well.
But Carrie also points out that the industry is showing signs of strength through this. One of those signs is its ability to help others in need while it's dealing with its own challenges.
So I'm hearing about extraordinary acts of kindness in the agriculture industry. Farmers are donating wheat, potatoes, whatever they can offer to people who are lacking. In fact, also that story about the distillery in Medicine Hat, where they switched over their operations to making hand sanitizer, and they were even giving it away. So there are hardships right now, but there is also hope.
That's it for this second in a 4-part series of Between the Rows, looking at COVID-19 and how it is affecting agriculture in Canada. In our third episode, host Gord Gilmour takes a closer look at the livestock sector. Thanks for joining us. I'm Laura Rance.
Between the Rows is a production of Glacier FarmMedia, Canada's leading farm publisher. We'd love to hear what you think of the show and invite you to send your comments to btr@farmmedia.com or visit us at membersgetmore.ca and sign up today